Lord Herbert of South Downs.
My Lords, it is the very greatest honour to have been appointed to your Lordship's house and to be speaking here for the first time. I would like to express my thanks to the Prime Minister for nominating me, and to the doorkeepers and staff and all those who have made me feel so welcome over the course of the last 2 weeks. They are very special people who are working here for us, especially given the circumstances and the current risks that everybody faces, and we should be very grateful to them. I'm very proud that 3 of the last 4 members of Parliament for Arundel are or have recently been members of this House. Proud to be joining my predecessor but one as the Member of Parliament for Arundel and South Downs, Lord Flight, and sad that my predecessor but 2, Lord Luce, retired from this House just before I joined it. I was hoping that the 3 of us might be able to be photographed together, because I wonder how many other parliamentary constituencies could claim such a record. I have taken the title Herbert of South Downs because my constituency that I was proud to represent for 15 years is called Arundel and South Downs. I still live in Arundel and still enjoy every week the beauty of the South Downs, one of the finest parts of this country, the most beautiful landscapes. It expresses the great love that I have always had for the countryside, a passion that I will continue to have, and whose interests I hope to promote while a member of your Lordship's House. I have the honour to be the chairman of the Countryside Alliance, a position that I have noted in the register. And it was there, or at least in its precursor organisation, that a very long time ago I met my friend Lord Mancroft, who was my lead supporter when I was introduced in this place. It was Lord Mancroft who insisted that I should wear robes, and pointed out that that indeed was provided for under the standing orders of the House, a practice that I understand has taken place since 1621, and I was very proud to have been able to do so. My other supporter and old friend, Lord Hill, I met in my first job when I became a member of the Conservative Research Department just after leaving university. I was given that job by the noble Lord Lexton. I think he was and remains surprised that he gave me the job, and he seemed similarly surprised to see that I had arrived in your Lordship's house. But I owe him a very great debt that 35 years ago he had the confidence in me to launch me on my political career. I arrive in your Lordship's house to discover that, of course, it is very different to the other place, but it is also very different to the place that it seemed to be just a few months ago because of the way proceedings are conducted. I am full of admiration for the way in which your Lordships are grappling with new technology so as to speak remotely and vote electronically. Indeed, I was remarking to a friend of mine, a former ambassador in the United States, that he might see it as a double constitutional outrage that I had been appointed a legislator for life and that I was now voting remotely, not even present in the chamber. And he nodded and smiled and said, yes, that is what we fought the War of Independence about. I hope that it will not be long before we are able to return to the previous practices of presence in this House. Of course, there is one should not necessarily believe that age is any impediment to being able to use new technology. My parents, who are elderly in common with many others of their generation, have become fiends in the use of personal phones and iPads. We encouraged my mother to begin texting, and she started to do so voraciously. I recall that I was sitting on the front bench in the other place when I received a message from my mother to say that I should call her urgently. I texted back to say that I was sitting on the front bench and was unable to do so. Yes, she replied by text, I can see that you're on the front bench. I am your mother. I would like you to call me now. I made my excuses, went out of the chamber, expecting that something terrible or dramatic had happened, and called only for my mother to ask if I would be there for lunch on Sunday. These are the imperatives of life. My lords, it's a very great pleasure to be able to rejoin the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Global LGBT Rights, which I founded along with many members here and in the other place, and had the honour to chair. I will be chairing the government's International LGBT+ conference that has, unfortunately, because of COVID, been postponed, but will, I hope, be held in some form next year. And I continue to chair the Global Equality Caucus of parliamentarians from around the world who are united in the belief in the importance of equality and ensuring that everybody is treated with dignity and respect according to their fundamental human rights. I also have rejoined the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Global Tuberculosis and indeed will now be resuming my co-chairmanship of that group. I also founded that group when 15 years ago I visited Kenya and learned about a disease called tuberculosis, the orphan of diseases, in that it is so little talked about, and yet it is still, despite COVID, the world's deadliest infectious disease. COVID tragically has now killed 1 million people worldwide, but tuberculosis still kills 1.5 million people every single year, and will do for many years to come unless we find a vaccine, unless we find new tools, and unless we renew our determination to beat it. We do not face a choice between tackling these infectious diseases. We must learn the importance of global health security. And I will also continue to chair the Global TB Caucus, trying to mobilise parliamentarians from around the world to take action to ensure that people can beat this terrible disease. I was appointed a minister in the Home Office and in the Ministry of Justice. It is not always easy to be a minister in two departments, as my noble friend the minister, I'm sure, is discovering. I soon realised that the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice are very different places. One notable difference was in the lifts. The Ministry of Justice lifts were much smarter than the Home Office lifts. I make no comment about them, but I was shown a button by my private secretary, that a code that I was able to key in. And if I did so, the lift would immediately come down to me or up to me to ensure that I could get in it very quickly and rush off to be able to vote. I thought that I would try out this process when no one else was around. I keyed in the code, the lift hurtled down to my floor, and the doors opened, and out stepped the then Lord Chancellor, now the noble Lord Clerk of Nottingham, my boss, who said that a sign had come up in the lift to say, "This lift is now under ministerial control." However, it was not under his control, and indeed we discovered that very little was when we were in the department. He asked me what on earth could have happened, and I suggested that he took the matter up with the permanent secretary and did not own up that I had seized command of his lift. I will continue to take the closest interest in matters to do with policing and criminal justice, and I have recently set up a commission for smart government, which has a membership which includes a number of members of this House on all sides, which is focused on how we can make government more effective. And one of the things that we want to try and do is to look at how any government can ensure that it is able to deliver. And in the end, that is the imperative for governments. I'm reminded of one of the things that a previous Lord Herbert of Cherbury, said in the 16th century, a poet, a soldier, a member of Parliament, brother of the poet George Herbert. He said, "The shortest answer is doing." And that is a motto that any politician and certainly any government would do very well to remember. That in the end, people will judge us not by what we say or promise, but by what we do and what we are able to deliver. There can surely be no more important task for any government than to make its people safe. And that is why this bill is so important and why I am so pleased to be able to speak at second reading of this short but important piece of legislation today. And if I may just say this in conclusion about the bill and about the Grenfell disaster. The tower was built in 1974. It is, or was, younger than almost every member of your Lordship's House. It was not an old building, it was a relatively new building. But the truth is this, that there are many wealthy people around the world who live in tower blocks. It would be surprising if they had faced the same situation or the same risk, because though the towers in which they live would have been equipped in a very different way. That is the truth of the matter. It is right that we take every step now to ensure that no such tragedy of the kind that we saw at Grenfell, in which 72 people lost their lives, could ever happen again. But at the root of what happened was that it revealed an injustice, a social injustice about the conditions in which some people were living and in which others would never have considered living. That, in the end, is why there is a wider agenda to level up in this country, an agenda that the Prime Minister has fully committed himself to, that I will proudly support.